Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Thursday. Hopefully, where you are at, you are enjoying some warmer spring weather. I know down here, Georgia-Cumberland Conference, we sure are. And so we are thankful for each of you taking a few moments out of your day to join us. We know it's a little bit of a commitment, and so we realize that and appreciate your time. We've got a number of people helping us all today. We've got Cameron Reel, who's helping from the technical side of things. Rachel Beaver is in the chat, monitoring those, and we'll be taking your questions. So feel free to share those. And if you haven't already, share where you're listening from and what you do in your church. We've got Xander helping from the technical side at Kentucky 10. And of course, we have Paola Mora as well from Kentucky Tennessee Conference with us this evening. So Paola serves as the Media Ministries Director for the Kentucky Tennessee Conference, and she'll be helping us all improve our storytelling ability. That is why we are all here, right? She is a gifted writer who uses compelling stories on social media and in print magazines to show how God is making a difference in people's lives. And as we know, storytelling is an important and effective method of creating community and witnessing. And today we'll be exploring the vital role of news writing for churches and how it offers a unique way to share the love of Jesus. And some of you have already seen this, but to refresh yourselves, some of the areas we're going to be talking about today is how to learn how to find compelling stories, understand the news value and the inverted pyramid and why that matters. We're going to help you master your interview skills, and we're also going to learn how to get your stories published, because it's no good writing a story if we can't get it published and get that great word out into our communities. And so as we go through the training, the best part about you joining us live this evening is you can submit your questions for the Q&A at the end. Just place your questions in the chat or comment section, and we'll be glad to answer those for you there at the end live. So Paola, over to you. Help us to improve how we use stories to share the love of Jesus.
As a church, why do we engage in news writing? Who would care to read about my ministry or my testimony? These are questions worth asking, and today we will not only learn why news writing is essential for your church, but also how to write an article effectively. So, once again, welcome to another episode of Media Minutes. Why is it important for you to share your church story? Simply put, it's all about informing and inspiring. By sharing our stories, we fulfill God's calling to tell of His love to the world. Imagine if the disciples had never written about the gospel, or if Ellen White never wrote about her visions. Writing is about connecting, engaging, and making an impact. Our church and individual testimonies contribute to a larger narrative that brings people closer to our community and God. So, let's get into it. How do you find your stories? It starts with understanding your audience. Who are you trying to reach? Is it your local community, your church members, or are you just trying to inspire fellow believers with your testimony? Whoever your audience is, keeping them in mind will help you decide what kind of stories you want to write. It would also help you in understanding your news value. News values are the factors that make a story newsworthy. We will cover 5 of them. First, there is timeliness. Recent events have a higher priority than evergreen stories, or stories that can be told at any time. So, think of stories where the timing is crucial. If you have a church event, people may not care about it 6 months after it happens. Instead, try to write the story as soon as it happens. Second is proximity. This emphasizes stories that are geographically close to your audience, making them more relatable. So, if your audience is your local community, they might not care so much about a food fair in Tallahassee, Florida, for example, but they would care about all the delicious food offered at your local church international food festival. Third, let's talk about impact. In simple terms, the more people it affects, the greater news value. Ask yourself, how many people will benefit from reading your story? How many people will want to learn more? Fourth, there is oddity. There is a quote in news writing that says, if a dog bites a man, then no one cares. However, if a man bites a dog, then that's news. In other words, if something is unusual, then your audience will probably want to learn more. Why did a man bite a dog? In a church setting, an example for this news value could be a week of prayer where all the preachers were children. That's unusual, and that's definitely very interesting. Finally, there is human interest. This is where your personal testimonies might fit. Human interest adds an emotional dimension to news by emphasizing stories that resonate with a human experience, evoking feelings of empathy, curiosity, or personal connection. These are the stories that touch the heart. Now we have all those news values in mind, let's talk about interviews. Interviews add depth and authenticity to your stories. Talk to the people who were involved or touched by your ministry. Talk to the person who has a testimony so powerful you can't seem to forget. And then talk to those who were a part of their story. Prepare for your interviews with thoughtful, well-researched, open-ended questions. In other words, questions that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. Make sure you come prepared to take notes, and most importantly, make sure you come prepared to listen. When writing, always aim to include quotes from your sources. Quotes bring your narrative to life and establish credibility. Once you've identified your story and conducted the interviews, structure it by using the inverted pyramid format. In this format, you will place the most crucial information at the beginning and gradually unfold the details. Make sure that on the first paragraph you answer as many of the 6 important questions: where, when, what, who, why, and how. This way, even if readers only skim through your article, they get the essence of your story right away. So you've crafted your story. Now what? Your stories were made to share. Share it on your church website, share it on your social media accounts, share it on your newsletter, send it to your local newspaper. Remember, pictures speak 1,000 words. So, whenever you share a story, make sure to include a few photos with it. You want to get published in the Southern Tidings? Connect with the communication team at your conference. We're here to guide you through the process, and we're here always eager to learn how God is blessing your church. Remember that the Southern Tidings is a fantastic opportunity to share your narrative with a broader audience. News writing is not just about words on paper. It's about making an impact, creating connections, and sharing the incredible stories within your church community. Start now, embrace the basics we've covered today, and become a storyteller for your faith. If you have any questions or need assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to your conference communication team. Thank you for joining this seminar, and happy writing.
Information packed into those few minutes. So thank you, Paola, for putting that together for us and reminding us of the critical elements to what makes a good news story. Do we have Paola? There we go. There's Paola.
I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'm very passionate about storytelling and about writing. So hopefully you have been inspired to also share your testimonies, your church ministries. They have a lot of power. So if you have any questions, I think we're ready to take them in at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have questions, share those in the comments with us, and we are going to get to those. And a little plug, if you haven't read any of Paola's stories, jump on over to the Kentucky Tennessee website. And Paola, you can mention that, but there's
Sure.
You'll see some of her stories there, and the way she crafts that human interest into so many of the stories that she writes.
Thank you. Yeah. So if you want to check it out, it's kytn.net.
Wonderful. So we've got a few questions here. So let's dive into those, and feel free to keep adding your questions as you come up with them. The value of this live is this Q&A, and so we will stick here unless it just goes into the wee hours of the night, but we'll stick here and go through all the questions that you have. So the first one, how do we determine which stories are newsworthy for our congregation?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And it's actually the beginning. Whenever you're going to write a news article, is the first thing you have to ask yourself is, who is my audience? So trying to figure out who your congregation is, that's going to help you figure out what's newsworthy for them. So if you're thinking specifically of your congregation, try to think of their age range. Are they older individuals? Do we have some young people in our church that we want to draw, interest, or maybe are we trying to attract parents, that kind of thing. So thinking of your audience helps you of what the demographic is of your audience help you realize what stories are worthy for your congregation. And then once you do that, then you can start thinking of the news value like we talked about. If your audience is, your congregation is mainly made of parents, then you can think, okay, something that would really affect parents is our summer Bible school, for example. And so now you have a story, okay, we have a summer Bible school coming up. How can we make this interesting? Because it happens every year, right? Or every so often. How can we make this unique? How can we make this stand out? And so just keeping those things in mind, knowing your demographics, and then knowing what news value might interest them is how you decide what's newsworthy for your congregation. Yes.
Absolutely. And as we determine what is newsworthy for our congregation, we mentioned, or you mentioned in the video, the inverted pyramid. And can you go a little bit more through that about why it's important and how we build that?
Sure. Yeah. So the inverted pyramid is what most journalists use. Whenever you read an article in CNN or I don't know, BBC, whatever it is, it's pretty much the idea that if you imagine, a pyramid upside down, the base is actually at the top. And so you have all the important information in that very first paragraph. And the reason why you do that, and the important information being that why, where, what, who, when, how. The reason why you do that is because people have a short attention span. If you guys are like me, like I will scroll through, my Instagram feed and read maybe 2 or 3 posts out of everything that I see. And so the idea is that if somebody comes across your story, they might not read the whole article. They're going to get really bored of, not necessarily bored, but they're going to lose interest quite quickly just because of how messed up our attention span is nowadays. But if they only read the first paragraph, and at least they're going to get the essence of the story. They know what happened. They know who was involved. They know when it happened. They know how it happened or why it happened. And so it just, gives them the essence. And sometimes people, after reading that, they're going to be more interested, and then they're going to continue reading. And that's why you start unfolding the details as you go down the line. Just the idea being that those who really care about the story can continue reading all the way till the end. But those who may not necessarily read the whole story, at least will know all the important details as soon as possible. And so that's the point of the inverted pyramid. And you don't have to answer necessarily all of those 5 or 6 questions that we talked about, but you have to answer them, at least some of the most important ones. And how you decide that is by, again, thinking of your news value. So if the news value of this story, is timeliness, for example, it's an event that's going to happen soon and you want people to know about it, make sure you answer the when on that first paragraph. And so usually I think on average you can answer about, sometimes you can do all 6, sometimes you do about 4 or 5 of them, but just keep this news value in mind. And then again, as you read down, the idea is that people will have the important information at the beginning.
And as I review some of the stuff that I write, I have to remind myself, if I saw this, would I be interested in reading it?
Yeah. And the truth is, some people might be interested in it, some people might not be interested in it. Everyone is very different, and that's why audiences are different, demographics are different. But I think, as long as people have the essence of the story, at least you're getting the message out there, and you're starting to grab that initial attention of the people who might want to read more.
Show of hands in the comments if you want to admit who actually clicks on the read more when you see those stories, either the news headlines and they've got 1 sentence, or in social media they've got a couple sentences. Who actually clicks the read more, right? And so that sort of shows you what we call the above the fold content. And so that having that important information that says, this is something I want to learn more about, that's the top, grabs my interest and goes to the story. So thank you.
I think it's just maybe like once a week that I will click on their link in the bio to read the entire story. So it's really, again, our attention span, mostly because of social media, is really short nowadays. So that's why we're trying to grab those first few seconds that we have.
So moving on to another question we have, are there any ethical considerations we should be aware of when writing church news?
It all, when you're writing a story, you first have to remember that you're dealing with people. And that's the most important thing. You're dealing with human beings who are trusting you with their testimony, who are trusting you with their stories. And some stories maybe it's just an event, but some stories are deeply personal. So when it comes to ethics, just think of, how can I be fair to this person? How can I listen to them? How can I be empathetic to them? Try, again, you're having news writing, the way I see it, is a privilege. And so by having that privilege, you just have to be responsible with it. So again, research your story, make sure you listen during the interview, write the story, keeping in mind, about the person, and then just keep things in mind. If you're talking to children, make sure you ask the parents their permission. And whenever you're going to talk to somebody, of course, ask their permission as well. Like, hey, I'm going to be sharing this. I'm going to be quoting you. Are you okay with that? So just keep those things in mind when you're writing stories for your church.
Absolutely. It's, part of the position we sit in with church news is we want to be newsworthy, but it's also a little bit of public relations. And so we do have a little bit of latitude. And so we don't want the first story you write to be the last story you write, because nobody else will talk to you because you've lost trust in them, or they feel like they weren't appropriately represented. And so,
and I've had people have shared during the interview their story with me, and very powerful stories, but later they call me back and they're saying, hey, you know what, actually I'm not comfortable sharing this anymore. Could you take out that part or just scratch my story? And in my mind, I'm like, oh man, that's such a great story, so many people will be blessed by it. But you want to respect their privacy, you want to respect their wishes. So if they tell you that, if they they're not comfortable, then don't push it.
Yeah. And a little shout out to you, Paola, because Johnny says it's always an unexpected pleasure when we get to hear from Paola. And he always clicks on the read more when he sees your story.
Oh, well. Thank you.
What platform should we use to distribute our church news effectively?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, thinking about our conferences and thinking in the union that we're at, obviously the Southern Tidings is one of the most effective ways to share your stories. And again, you can contact your conference communication team to do that. The Southern Tidings is not going to reach only your local community or your local conference. It's going to reach the whole union. And so that's obviously very powerful. And other places for you to share your church stories more locally, in this case, would be social media and your church's website. And the reason why I'm a big advocate of sharing your stories on these two platforms is because these are kind of like the landing pages for new members, for people, for visitors. When they want to learn about you, they might not come to your church first thing. They might first check your social media account or your website. And so by having stories there that show, human interest, that shows like, hey, they're doing activities to help the community, they're doing activities to reach the young people in the church, they might be interested to learn more about who you are as an organization. And of course, the other very effective way to reach your church, the communities around you, is through your local newspapers. I'm a big advocate for local journalism. I think it's so important. And unfortunately, local newspapers are decreasing around the country. But if you have a local newspaper, go to their website. They usually have there an email that you can reach out to for like the news editor or just the information desk or anything like that. And you can send them an email with your story. Make sure your headline in the email is short and catching, to the point. But then tell them, hey, I have this story. And you can just give them the information of how to, who to contact, or just write, a draft yourself and be like, this is what I have. If you need any more information, feel free to call me at this number. And again, that's a great way to reach your local community. I think Nathan disappeared.
So yeah, all very good points there. Sometimes local communities may not have a print newspaper, but they will have an online newspaper only. And so even, remember all outlets available to you in your community. It also builds relationships, and that serves you well when you want to do outreach. If an unfortunate event happens, having those relationships so the community knows you for what you normally do, not for the crisis. It's an important part of a church strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important. And news, I think, is about building those relationships. When we share our stories, it's about building connections with other people, because we don't realize our stories are very can be relatable to others as well.
You mentioned Southern Tidings. How about conference methods of news distribution?
Sure. Well, here in the Kentucky Tennessee Conference, we have Connection. That's our quarterly magazine. And so, again, if you are interested in having a story about your church, about your ministry in our magazine, you can reach out to me. My email is pmora@kytn.net. That's also in the video that we saw earlier. So we have our email. Again, we make a lot of use of our social media accounts. And another thing, not exactly with news writing, but we also share a lot of our stories in video testimony format. So as long as you reach out to us and we know that your story is out there, we try to search stories, but when the stories come to us, it's even better. We're happy to look into them. We're happy to help you write them. If you want to write them yourself, I can help you with it. If you just want help editing, I can help you with it. If you have an idea and you hate writing, it's okay. I love writing. So just let me know. Give me the contact information of the people to talk to, and I'll write it for you. And I believe, Georgia-Cumberland, I'll let you speak more for what you guys do because you're more familiar. I know you also have your magazine, which is you have to help me with that. But I know Georgia-Cumberland also has their communication methods. And yeah, I'll let you take over what you guys have.
Yeah, so we have the communique as well. And we are always glad to receive stories from our churches. The stories we receive from our churches and schools is the number one way that we receive stories, and the number one stories that we share out with others. So my email, nzinner@gccsda.com. I have a challenge out to our conference this year, and Paola, you can join it if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But if every church shared one story this year, we would have in our conference close to 200 stories.
Wow.
Which would be more than enough to fill every page that we have allocated in the tidings and every page we have allocated in communique. So we have, if we have too many stories, we have our website and social media as well. But one story, you think about that with everything that churches do, it would seem that every church should be able to accomplish.
And something that I find is that sometimes I'm talking to church members at an event or something, and they're telling me about their testimony or about something their church is doing. And then I'm like, oh, that's so wonderful. Like, can I learn more about it? Could we do an interview? I want to write a story. And they're surprised. They're like, oh, I didn't think anyone would care about this. Like, I didn't think it was worth the story. Of course, they're very proud and excited about what they're doing, but they didn't think a wider audience would have an interest. But the truth is, that's how it works. People want to know about other people. And so, again, even if you're not sure your story is newsworthy, just share it to somebody. I'm sure some people are going to find value in it.
There's probably a lot of people in the Bible, the stories we read in the Bible, people didn't think the stories were interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Today. What is a good length for an article, and is there a word count that we should shoot for?
Yeah, I think by rule of thumb, I try to think of a news article somewhere between 200 to 500 words. And this really depends. I don't think there's like a hard rule of how long your article should be. I've had articles that have gone up to like 1,000 words or more. And I've had articles that are just like 150 words, So it really just depends on what information you have, how many quotes you have, what you think is relevant. You don't have to include everything in the article, but what is the most relevant information you want people to know. But as a rule of thumb, I think, 200 to 500 words, it's a good count.
Absolutely.
Question after that, I only heard one of them.
So we've got some information on our website, and Cameron, I just put that in the chat if you want to throw that up. For story guidelines, some tips on writing stories. So if you want to go back on point to point, we will have this video available as well on archive. But this page here has some guidelines on writing stories, some word counts. These word counts apply to Georgia-Cumberland Conference, but provides also some tips, like I said, to go back to on the news values and all that. So that resource may be helpful to you. What are some, you mentioned open-ended questions. What would be some examples of those?
Yeah, so pretty much an open-ended question is a question that you cannot answer with a yes or no sentence, simply because you cannot really quote that. Like, that's not very interesting. So for example, if you're at the Pathfinder Camporee, you are not going to ask the Pathfinder, did you like this Camporee? Because they might just say yes, or they might just say no. And then how do you expand on that? That's not very interesting. So instead, you're going to ask, what was your favorite thing about this Pathfinder Camporee? What is something that you wish they would have done differently this year? What do you look forward to most next year after being in this event? So just questions where people have to expand, So now if they ask me, what did you like the most about the Pathfinder Camporee? I have to think more, and my answer might be, I really like how we got to connect with different clubs from across the conference, and I got to make new friends. And so now that sentence makes a better quote than just a simple yes, I like this camporee. So that's the idea of open-ended questions.
And the best open-ended question to end with is,
do you have anything else you'd like to add? Yeah, so after every interview, you just ask them, is there anything else that I didn't ask that you would like to say? And usually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's when you get usually the best quotes. Usually that's where I get my ending quotes of any article. It's that last little sentence that they said that they hadn't thought of, that I hadn't thought of, and it's usually very beautiful. And something that going in that topic of interview, something that I want to add is when you come to an interview, you're coming with a list of questions, of things that you want to touch, points that you want to touch on. But like we mentioned in the video, one of the most important things to come with is a listening ear, because when you're listening to stories, you may notice that the story has maybe a different direction that you were not thinking of. And so it's good that you're able to come up with follow-up questions, or just, maybe take a different route than what you were planning. And so come with your list of questions. Don't forget to ask anything else at the end, but also come with a listening ear.
And remember that silence is okay.
Yeah.
You'll ask the question and there'll be silence. Don't feel that. I find that if I just let that silence linger, it feels uncomfortable. And sometimes they're also just thinking. And so it leads them to unpack. And so being patient, letting those pauses happen can also be beneficial to you.
Yeah. Sometimes they feel like they have to, you may feel awkward, the person may feel awkward, so they feel like they have to fill in that silence, and they say something else that, again, ends up being very interesting.
How do we identify our church's audience?
So how you identify your church's audience, again, kind of goes back to thinking who you're trying to reach. So you can have more than one audience. Just think, am I trying to reach that community? Who am I trying to inspire with this story? Am I trying to inspire local church members? Am I trying to inspire the young people in my church? Am I just trying to share my testimony to inspire other believers? And so by thinking of who your audience is, that's how you like, I guess, identify them. Just, there's different avenues that you can reach each different group. And when you're writing your story, think, okay, which group am I trying to reach with this specific article?
Important questions. Thank you. Jumping over to social media. Sometimes social media, there might be a short form story or whatnot, but can you give us some tips on writing captions for social media?
Okay. When it comes to news writing, you mean like writing a cap? So usually, again, you want to have the most important information early on in your caption. You want to be able to. I usually don't write the entire story on the social media caption, but of course I have that lead there, so they know the who, the when, the what, and then maybe I give 2 more paragraphs with a quote from the story. Quotes are very important because they bring your story to life, and it gives you credibility. And now you hear somebody saying like, yes, this was such a blessing to me. This program was so amazing, or, I really felt how God led me in this experience. So those quotes, make your story more relatable. And so, yeah, so have the lead at the beginning and maybe another paragraph and a quote. And then if you want, again, not everyone is going to go through it, but some people want to learn more. Just say, hey, if you want to learn more, go to our website, click the link on our bio, or, comment on this post and we'll DM you the link to the story. That's always, I think, the way I like to approach it.
You mentioned quotes. Who should we quote in an article, and can we quote ourselves?
Okay, that's a good question. So please, if you're writing the article, if you're the author, do not quote yourself. It just kind of takes credibility from the story, because it's like, according to who? Well, according to me, like, trust me. So instead, try to think who is relevant to the story. If it's a program, it might be the organizers, and it might be maybe someone who attended the program. If it's a story about the church history, talk to the pastor, and then talk to the church member who has been there, from the very, very beginning, or for a very long time. Usually, when I interview somebody, I always ask them, hey, thank you for this, for your time, for the information. Is there anyone else you think I should talk to for this story? And they usually have 1 person or 2 people in mind. I think, as a rule of thumb, I usually try to have at least 2 different sources in my story. So just, try to keep who have the most relevant and credible information for the article that you're writing.
Could you give some examples of who those credible people or insight people would be?
It just really depends on what your story is about. Obviously there's not like one sole answer, but if you're talking about a fundraiser, for example, that your church is doing, a credible source will be your treasurer. Your treasurer might know, okay, how much money was exactly raised in this fundraiser. Or if you're writing about somebody's testimony, obviously you want to talk to the person who experienced that firsthand. You also want to talk to maybe a friend who saw them going through, whatever struggle, whatever guidance, whatever, way God guided them. So it's about just thinking of your story and who could add a relevant subject to it.
Yeah. Thank you. So shifting a little bit to the submission process, what do I need to have when submitting a story for the Southern Tidings or for our conference publications?
Sure. So, it might be a bit different depending if you want somebody to help you write the story or if you just want a story that's already written and ready to send. So if you're the one who already has a story ready to go and you just want to submit it and share it, so make sure you have a story. It's written in the third person point of view. Do not write it in the first person point of view. Third person point of view, it's about 200 words. Make sure there's some quotes in it. Again, as a rule of thumb, I like to have at least 2 different people that are being quoted in the article. And then include a picture. Pictures speak 1,000 words. Pictures add life to the story. Usually when somebody's flipping through a magazine, there's so many information in it. They might not be interested, but if they see a picture that stands out, they might actually, let me read the caption of that photo. And then after they read the caption, let me read more about the story. And they like the lead and then they continue reading the story. So those are the main things. Make sure you have a story written following the inverted pyramid, written in the third person point of view. And then make sure you have quotes. Make sure it's about 200 words or so. And then make sure you include a picture.
We've talked about the inverted pyramid, but why does the important info come first? Shouldn't we save the best for last?
Yes. So again, just going back to attention span nowadays, I think I know I don't have a very long attention span. I'm usually watching TV and on TikTok and with a podcast in the background, But so that's the reason why we keep the most important information at the beginning. You just want to be able to. You want readers to get the essence of the story right away. And as you unfold, you can give more details. And that's not saying that information down the line is not important anymore. It's just that, if people stop reading before they get to those details, they're still going to know what the story is about. I always like to leave usually my last few sentences, paragraphs for quotes, a quote that kind of closes everything. I think that it's kind of like the little ribbon that ties the gift. I think when you have a very powerful, inspiring quote, I like to usually put those at the end.
Yeah, a great inspiration to leave people with.
So they can something to think about.
All right, we're getting to our last question. So if there's any more questions you have, feel free to send those to us either in the chat or the comments section, or you can, of course, email those to either of us, and we'll be glad to answer your individual questions. But we talked a little bit about pictures. We talked a little bit about captions. But how important are captions for photos that accompany the stories that are being submitted?
Captions and pictures and news, they all go very well together. And so captions, I would say, is just as important as the photo. It's just as important as the article itself. Again, it is so that people, somebody may not read the entire article, so if they only read the little caption, at least they know something about what's going on. When you're writing your captions, you might want to include the date, when was this picture taken, who took the photo. There's some information you might want to give to your communication team from your conference. And also just tell us who is in the picture and what are they doing, just to give context to why is this relevant.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paola. I think that is all the questions that we have. But we talked about pictures. That's not going to be our next training, but stay tuned because we do have that on the docket for later this year. And so we want to get back to that because, yes, pictures are so important, especially on social media.
Mhm.
So be watching that. But we do have our next training coming up on May 9 on copyright. And so if that is an interest to you, we're going to be dealing with different areas of copyright, both print, pictures, for example, copyright in and content that we might be using, content that we'll put on social media, content for streaming. Where do we get music from? All this kind of good stuff. So there's a lot of layers of copyright. So we're going to try to unpack that in, again, just a few minutes and answer your questions. So May 9, scan this QR code to start signing up now. And as we get closer, you'll be reminded of our next training. So May 9 on copyright. Again, thank you so much, each one of you, for joining us. Thank you for what you do. You are the front lines of our church communication in all the communities that we serve across Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia. And so we can't say enough our thanks for what you do. With that, have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to receiving more stories or story requests from your area so that we can continue sharing the good news of what is happening in your local community. Have a wonderful evening.